there is a unique and powerful ability of perspective to change the way we view the world. I'm a child of divorce, and my life was characterized by the constant transition between two worlds. In one of those worlds, I was the daughter of a hippie-esque mother that relied on governmental assistance. In that world, we were taught to meditate, encouraged to travel to different dimensions, and taught that the government was trying to destroy our creativity. In that world, I had a small blue laundry basket of belongings that I took to my grandmother's house because we needed a place to stay. And I remember this look on her face when she asked me, "Is that all you have?" In that world, because of how often my mom was gone, I was in charge of cooking, cleaning, taking care of children, including my just out of the NICU baby sister, Abigail. She would lay on my chest while I did my homework for school. And to this day, we have an unbreakable bond that I cherish. In that world, sometimes food stamps would run out. And on those weeks, peach-flavored, off-brand Quaker oatmeal would be my breakfast and my lunch. And today it's my comfort food. I remember writing papers to the sounds of my neighbors yelling through the thin walls of our Section 8 apartment that we later got evicted from and had to move for the 5th time since my parents' divorce. In my other world, I was the daughter of a businessman who made something out of nothing on multiple occasions. When I told my brothers what to do, I was reminded that I was not the boss and just being bossy. At 16, I worked in my father's shipping warehouse, where I learned the value of a good work ethic and the unconventional methods of moving boxes as a small person, or as my dad refers to me still, to this day, as a Smurfette. Living life in two different worlds made me feel like I couldn't fully be a part of either one. I tried hard to separate my life spaces into two different boxes because I developed this notion that my identity could only acknowledge one of those life spaces at once. The way I tried to simplify the duality of my upbringing reminds me of how we, as political populations, often try to simplify ourselves. Our approach to politics in the United States is extremely polarized. If we're a Republican, then we have to check all of the Republican boxes, and we cannot deter from that. And if we are Democrat, we have to take on every part of the Democrat narrative, or we're traitors. And this all-or-nothing approach to politics manifests itself into public policy with the position of party whips, whose job it is to push your congressional representative into voting along party lines rather than with their gut. We are told by our political parties that our way is right and their way is wrong. But what if there is more than one right? My story allowed me to see and live two different truths. I understand where the resentment of those who live on welfare comes from. I understand the frustration of working hard while a portion of my paycheck goes to help those who sometimes choose not to help themselves. But then I also understand that without food stamps, some weeks I wouldn't have eaten. And without governmental assistance, I'm not really sure where we would have lived sometimes. I've had the privilege of living both insecurity as well as security. And my story empowers me to look at the world through different perspectives. It teaches me that polar opposites can simultaneously be right and wrong. It teaches me that we cannot have a holistic solution if we only look at one face of a three-dimensional problem. We have to work together. But unfortunately, ordinary people are liking other ordinary people from opposing political parties less and less. Data from the Pew Research Center in a report titled Partisanship and Political Animosity in 2016 found that between 1996 and 2016, disfavorable views of the opposite party on both sides have risen from 20% to about 60%. more and more we hold negative attitudes towards people from the other side. And because of that, we avoid them. And through that, we form echo chambers where our political and social views become more and more correct because there is no challenge to them. And when we're placed in positions where we do have to listen to the other side, it can get tense and hostile very quickly. And that is why the data shows discomfort in talking politics. According to the Pew Research Center in 2019, in a report titled "The Public's Level of Comfort Talking Politics and Trump," they found that 48% of people are not at all comfortable talking politics with a stranger, while only 17%, that's me, are very comfortable with it. Now, in comparison, 74% of people are very comfortable talking about the weather. And 1% are not at all comfortable with it, and I really want to know why. The majority of Americans find that conversing with the other side makes them frustrated, afraid, or angry. Americans don't want to talk to the other team, which sounds a lot like my parents' divorce. But here's the good thing. It doesn't have to be hard or scary like my parents' divorce. And it shouldn't. Let's look at this cube together. Your perspective, your facts, your ideas represent one face of this cube. And if you only talk to people that see that same face as you, sure, you have some knowledge of an issue. You know the length and the width, but you lack the depth. I was sitting on a train coming from New York City to Long Island with my grandmother. She, a retired nurse, and me, a college student who clearly knows everything, were talking about universal healthcare policies. Pretty quickly into the conversation, an old white, I'm sorry, he was like 30, jumps into the conversation and he says, "I'm a staunch conservative." And so we talked. We talked about the pros and the cons of universal healthcare. We shared our stories. We talked about what it looked like in other nations, like Australia, and how it might look if it was implemented in the United States. And pretty soon, the train stopped. And as the man was getting off, he said, "I'm a moderate." My biggest piece of advice for young people these days is to stay in the middle and to look at both sides, as if he didn't get on the train as a staunch conservative. Conversations are powerful. So, how do you have a political conversation and have it not look like the beginning of World War III? It goes back to a principle that is over 1,500 years old. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Ask questions of your conversational partner. Challenge them. Sometimes choose to drop an offense. Affirm your conversation partner where you agree with them. And when you don't, remember that sometimes tension can be a good thing. And there was a lot of tension I went on this date 2 weeks ago. And I know that there's like this unspoken rule to not talk politics on a second date, but I'm me. So naturally, I asked him who he voted for in the 2020 election. And then I asked him why. This is what it's like to go on a date with a debate coach. And he told me that he really didn't understand much about politics and just went with his gut. And then we transitioned the conversation to police brutality, which he said he was against, but he didn't have the language to talk about the issue in a respectful way. And I'll be honest, I wanted my friend to call me with a fake emergency. But at the end of the day, I have the knowledge. I'm informed, I was safe, and I have the capacity to inform another person. So, I told him to stop talking like we live in the days of Jim Crow. I gave him a quick vocabulary lesson and a lecture on white privilege. And he listened. he admitted his ignorance and changed the way he spoke. But I listened first. And when I listened, I found out that he really didn't enjoy political conversations. I learned that for him, they were hard because his two families, Republican and Democrat, would fight it out at the dinner table, and the tension was too high, and so he withdrew. And I know a lot about tension. I grew up in tension, jumping around between two different worlds and then within each of those worlds. He didn't want to have a political or a social conversation because he didn't feel like he had the knowledge to talk about the issue. And so I challenged him. When we don't have the knowledge to talk about the issue, let's get informed. And then we can talk about it. Then, families, friend groups, and schools, we gotta do better. Let's have those hard conversations so we can challenge each other's perspectives and grow, rather than isolating our perspectives. Let's have a conversation at that dinner table about the hard things. So, while there might not be a third date, which I informed him of after he paid, there was growth. And that, not my failing dating life, is the point. We have to attack the problem, not the party. And remember that you're only going to be able to understand a whole problem if you can understand its depth. Seeing a three-dimensional shape as flat causes a variety of issues. Think back to 1492, when Christopher Columbus sparked the erasure of America's indigenous populations. You probably thought I was going to say sailed the ocean blue. But as always, there is more to the story. You may never be on the exact same page as your opposite party or same party counterpart, and I'm not going to advocate that you should be. But what I am saying is that there is value in having those political and social conversations that remove partisan language, the name-calling, the defensiveness, and instead focus in on that issue. And that is what they did in a 2019 experiment by the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago. There were 526 voters from all over the country that came in, sat at tables over a weekend, and had conversations about policies. They were strangers with different stories, different backgrounds, different races, ethnicities, and political ideologies. There were no moderators, and nobody even died. But in fact, they began to hold more favorable views of people from the other party, of each other. So, to have a conversation, we gotta drop the name-calling, the assumptions, the defensiveness, and just tell our story, because after all, your story might be the face on the political or social cube that your conversation partner might not know about. So, let's start by getting on a train together. Have a conversation with a talkative college girl and her grandmother. We might get off the train at different stops with different conclusions, but provided neither of us go flying off the rails, the important part is that we get off the train at a different point than which we got on it. Thank you.